Dean Martin hadn't visited anyone on their deathbed in years. In fact, those close to him said he avoided hospitals entirely, refusing to say goodbye when goodbye felt permanent. That's why, as Sammy Davis Jr. lay dying in a quiet hospital room in Los Angeles, no one truly believed Dean would come. And yet, when Dean finally did walk through that door, the words he spoke would leave Sammy crying tears of joy in his final days. It was the kind of moment no one could have planned. Two legends, one final conversation, and decades of unspoken emotion hanging in the air. Those who knew Sammy said there was only one thing he truly wanted before the end. Not awards, not applause, not recognition, but a visit from the friend who had stood beside him for more than 30 years. As the hours passed and the room grew quieter, it seemed that wish would remain unanswered. Dean Martin was known for many things: charm, humor, effortless cool. But emotional goodbyes were not one of them. Still, on one afternoon in May 1990, everything changed. It was May 1990, inside Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Sammy Davis Jr. was losing his battle with throat cancer. The disease had already stolen his voice, reducing the man who once commanded world-class stages to fragile whispers. Machines surrounded his bed, softly humming as nurses came and went with careful steps. Hollywood had not forgotten him. Frank Sinatra visited often, holding Sammy's hand and sharing stories from their glory days. Flowers arrived from Elizabeth Taylor. Liza Minnelli sang quietly at his bedside. Messages poured in from fans around the world, each one reminding Sammy that his life had mattered. And yet, despite all of that love, something was missing. There was one absence that weighed heavier than all the others combined, one friend whose silence hurt more than the illness itself. Dean Martin hadn't come. As the days passed, Sammy began to accept what he feared most, that the final goodbye he wanted would never happen. For Sammy, this wasn't about celebrity, it was about brotherhood. Dean Martin's absence wasn't personal, at least not in the way people might assume. Those close to him understood that Dean had a complicated relationship with loss. He avoided hospitals, he avoided funerals, he avoided final moments that couldn't be undone. Frank Sinatra once explained it simply: Dean doesn't do deathbeds. It's not that he doesn't care, it's just not who he is. But for Sammy, logic didn't ease the pain. For more than 30 decades, Dean had been like family. They had shared stages, hotel rooms, laughter, and the kind of unspoken understanding that only comes from years of standing side by side. Sammy remembered how Dean had quietly demanded equal treatment for him during a time when discrimination was still common, never making speeches, never seeking praise. Dean showed loyalty through actions, not words. Now, as Sammy lay in that hospital bed, memories flooded back. Vegas nights, inside jokes, shared glances on stage. With each passing hour, the hope that Dean would come faded. Sammy wondered if his friend would remain silent one last time. To understand why this moment mattered so deeply, you had to understand Dean Martin. He wasn't the loudest voice in the room. He wasn't the most emotional. While Frank Sinatra wore his feelings openly and Sammy expressed his affection freely, Dean kept everything carefully locked away. Dean believed in showing up quietly. When hotels refused Sammy equal treatment, Dean didn't argue publicly. He changed contracts behind closed doors. When tensions rose, Dean diffused them with humor, not speeches. He stood beside his friends without needing applause for it. That quiet loyalty defined him. But silence has a cost. Over time, words left unsaid can become heavy. And as Dean aged, especially after the tragic loss of Dean Paul, he became even more withdrawn. Those close to him said grief had changed him, slowing his step and dimming the swagger the world once knew. Still, one memory refused to let him rest. Sammy Davis Jr. was dying, and Dean knew, deep down, that this was a moment he couldn't avoid forever. As Sammy drifted in and out of consciousness, memories filled the quiet hours. He remembered the early days when the Rat Pack ruled Las Vegas and every night felt electric. He remembered laughing uncontrollably on stage with Dean, sometimes for no reason anyone else could understand. He remembered moments when words weren't needed, just a look, a shared smile, a sense of belonging. For Sammy, Dean wasn't just a colleague, he was proof that friendship could exist without conditions. Even during the hardest times, Dean had always been there in ways that mattered. And somewhere else in Los Angeles, Dean Martin was remembering those same moments. He carried a photograph with him, one from 1960, showing the Rat Pack in their prime, arms around each other, full of life. He'd found it weeks earlier and couldn't bring himself to put it down. That photograph became a reminder of something unfinished, something that needed to be said before it was too late. On the afternoon of May 14th, there was a soft knock at the hospital room door. Sammy's wife looked up, expecting a nurse. Instead, Dean Martin stepped quietly inside. Time had changed him. He looked older, more fragile. The effortless swagger was gone, replaced by careful steps and tired eyes. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, Sammy opened his eyes. "Dino," he whispered. "Hey, Smokey," Dean replied gently. "You look terrible." Sammy laughed, truly laughed, for the first time in weeks, before the sound dissolved into a cough. Dean pulled a chair close and sat beside the bed. For several minutes, neither man spoke. 30 years of friendship passed between them without a single word. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Sammy finally said. "I wasn't sure I would either," Dean admitted. But he was there now, and that changed everything. Dean leaned closer, his voice quieter than anyone had ever heard it. He told Sammy things he had never said out loud, that Sammy was the heart of everything they did, that his grace in the face of cruelty had taught Dean what real class looked like. Dean recalled nights when discrimination threatened to break the group apart, and how Sammy always chose dignity over anger. "You showed me how to be better," Dean said, his voice cracking. Tears streamed down Sammy's face. These were words he had waited his entire life to hear. Then Dean shared a secret. Years earlier, during one of the darkest periods of his life, Sammy had stayed with him all night, reminding him that music and friendship mattered more than politics or fame. "You saved me," Dean said quietly. Sammy squeezed Dean's hand with what little strength he had left. In that moment, nothing mattered. Not illness, not time, not regret. Only truth. Dean reached into his jacket and pulled out the photograph. The Rat Pack, frozen in time, young, laughing, unstoppable. Sammy stared at it, remembering a world where everything seemed possible. "We were something," Sammy whispered. "We were everything," Dean replied. That photograph became more than an image. It was proof. Proof that what they had shared was real, lasting, and untouched by time. After a final promise and a quiet goodbye, Dean kissed Sammy's forehead and told him something he had never said before. "I love you, Smokey." "I love you too, Dino." Dean stayed for another hour, holding his hand, sharing memories. When he finally left, both men knew it was the last time they would see each other. 2 days later, Sammy Davis Jr. passed away peacefully. The photograph was found on his nightstand. Those who knew Sammy said something changed after Dean's visit. The fear was gone. In its place was peace. He had received what he needed most, not fame, not praise, but understanding. Dean Martin attended Sammy's funeral, one of the few he appeared at in his later years. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Years later, when asked about that final conversation, Dean would only say, "We said what needed to be said."
The photograph now rests in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. On the back, in Dean's handwriting, are the words, "For Smokey, the best there ever was. Love, Dino." Some friendships don't need constant words, but sometimes the right words, spoken at the right moment, can last forever. If this story moved you, share it with someone who understands the importance of saying what matters while there's still time. This story is based on historical accounts, biographies, interviews, and long-standing cultural narratives. Some events may be disputed or unverified. This content is intended for educational and storytelling purposes only.